we're facing really a point in our state's history where decisions have to be made that are going to determine the next 30, 40, 50 years of our economic growth, our solvency, and really our priorities as a state. There was a lot of talk, are we going to talk about, is this going to be like a toll forum? It's really, my feeling is, tolls are a part of this conversation, but what has to be really considered is, how are we going to develop the kind of revenue stream, the kind of develop the resources needed to build our infrastructure going forward, to plan our infrastructure going forward. So that's this conversation. So fixing, excuse me.
And I'm just going to add, I really think if we want to get our economy moving, one of the key reasons that we need to do that is we're having a struggle here. And one way for us to do that is to get our transportation up and going. I mean, it's sad to see that there are jobs that are open right now that aren't being filled because people can't get around. So this is really impeding our growth, and it is super vital that we get this right. And we have a very good opportunity right now, and so that's one reason I've really jumped on this transportation bandwagon.
A few years ago, they did a poll of siting executives for corporations, and the number 2 metric they look at, the number 2 thing they look at in terms of deciding where they're going to locate a company is the state's infrastructure, is their ability to handle traffic, to plan moving forward. So Representative Dathan is right. It's basically, if we're going to have long-term prosperity, we have to have fiscal sustainability, and we have to modernize our rails, and as well as also develop the resources to plan on the kind of things that, once you build the roads, once you build the bridges, once you get all that going, you need to also have transit-oriented development. You also need to start looking at light rail and other things that develop a higher return on your investment for developing infrastructure. So that's it. 30 years of sporadic, unfocused transportation policy has led to predictable results today. What that means is essentially, in the last 30 years, Connecticut has underinvested in our spur lines, in our bridges, rails, and I don't have to tell you anything you don't already know. You've seen where we are. You see that your perception is like mine. The bottlenecks, the tie-ups, going through getting from Norwalk down to the Stamford area every morning is excuse me, is ridiculous. Then we also look at what other states are doing in terms of developing their rail systems. We keep asking ourselves why are we not further along? Why are we not more competitive with other states and in what they're doing? And at the end of the day, it really comes down to planning. But I think I'm getting ahead of myself. Would you like to add anything?
That sounds great. Keep going.
Okay. Yes, existing conditions, the good, the bad, the ugly, and the obsolete. These grades, these letter grades, were put together by it's really a construction group, and it's a group that monitors transportation infrastructure across the United States. And our challenges are very clear. We have a special transportation fund, and more about that later, but a special transportation fund that we have to pay for repairs, improvements in all of these areas. It is a diminishing asset because it's paid for largely with gasoline tax, and that's it's basically a diminishing asset. Hybrid vehicles, I love them, I have one, but they're not really helping the situation because the revenue is not there. So we are losing revenue to build and continue to improve our roads, rails, and bridges, but while at the same time, the debt service created to make existing improvements is also eating away at the special transportation fund. So we have this two-pronged drain on our special transportation fund.
I'm just gonna add, the rails, are really struggling. There is several bridges, and in the course of my lifetime, the time to get from Norwalk into Grand Central Station has got, increased by another sort of 15 minutes. And it's shocking that while the rest of the world is, decreasing their travel time, we're actually increasing. There's 224 bridges, or
242.
242 bridges, both rail and road, that are in a state of disrepair. That's causing issues. I actually had an issue with my car that, went over a pothole and caused me personally over $1,000 worth of damage to my undercar. We can't afford that in our state for every single person to do this, so it's really
Where was
time.
that pothole for their benefit? You might want to-
It was actually in New Canaan.
Okay. Well, I used to chair the DPW on the Norwalk Council, so it's when I talk about things like investing in our infrastructure going forward, my hats off to what Mayor Rilling is doing with the DPW. They're basically developing an approach to cataloging and understanding where the maintenance needs to be ahead of time for potholes and that kind of thing. And what it does is it improves the amount of it improves the overall quality of the roads in Norwalk. We have 250 miles of which, but I digress. Anyway, moving on. Yeah.
It speaks for itself.
So, but yeah, I'm not sure I have to say anything. I mean, we are, we're behind the times, and we are in a situation where we're trying to play catch up. This is, for legislators to come out on a Monday night with it been raining and come out and talk about tolls, it's generally something that people really don't advise, but the fact of the matter is you need to understand really the situation that the state of Connecticut is in, so you can make informed decisions, and so you can also give us your feedback and tell us what you think about this. So,
We can just keep kind of going on,
Yeah.
because I think, a lot of these speak for themselves, but, you see, overpass and bridges.
Yeah. Can you go back to the other one for a second? Yeah, the average age of, that's big, the overall group of bridges. So go to the next one. Yeah, one of those is in Norwalk, and you might have heard. And I'd say, this is the kind of thing we're talking about. It's obsolete technology. It's technology that was helpful during the McKinley administration, but when you have to decide, what bridges, when you don't have enough resources to decide what bridges get fixed versus can we do anything about pinch points going into Stamford or exit 9, the new Route 1 bridge or any of the other issues that are tying us up, it becomes a much bigger issue. So under investing in our, I'll let the graphics do it. Why are other states around us thriving? They make infrastructure investment a priority. Essentially, this is from 2008, but this level of investment down here represents Connecticut. The slightly higher it represents Massachusetts, and I live in New York. New York is here. I mean, obviously, taking populations into account, these numbers are going to change. But at the end of the day, I could put other states up here, and it would be the same story. You look at what Virginia is doing. They started planning 30 years ago about how they're going to build out their rail system, their road networks, and they haven't deviated from that. They've continued to work against that plan, and really that's the kind of thing Connecticut needs to be doing. Next. What does this mean for taxpayers and drivers?
Your needs all speak for themselves. We experience it. You wouldn't be here tonight if this wasn't an issue for you. So I thank you all for coming, but this is why it's such a priority and that we need to get this fixed.
Okay, next. This is a special transportation fund, is it?
So just to kind of highlight it, within our government, we actually have different funds that manage different aspects of our government. So we have our general fund that handles sort of our human services, our education, things like that. And then we have what's called the Special Transportation Fund, which handles everything in regards to transportation. You probably remember the referendum item that you voted on in November, which said basically everything that's raised on behalf of roads and transportation is going to stay in that. And this is what the Special Transportation Fund basically is, like the enterprise that handles all the DOT work.
So, moving ahead.
And just to kind of, before we kind of jump too far ahead, within this entity, the revenues coming in are the gas taxes, the new car sales taxes, and we have other little tax items that are coming into that fund. But outgoing, 40% of that fund is debt servicing all of our infrastructure projects that we've been doing for the last 25, 30 years.
So when you get into the discussion about, well, why don't we just float more bonds and be done with it? Obviously, that's you get into diminishing returns. The more debt service you create, you're pulling more resources that need to go to education, that need to go to public health, that need to go to other places, rather than doing projects that really could have been planned out better, but frankly, the kind of strain it puts on the Special Transportation Fund, like I said, it also eats up funds needed for the mixed master and other projects.
So just the revenues coming in are not enough to sustain what needs to happen, just on a general operating before we even look at any infrastructure projects. And the fund, the Special Transportation Fund, is, right now is on a path to going to be insolvent. And so the concern that we have is, and I'm 25 years of finance background, when a company is looking towards getting to be insolvent, they aren't able to layer on new debt. And one, they're not going to get any decent bond ratings, but number two, it's just not going to happen from a finance perspective. So we need to look at what is a good revenue stream. And as Chris alluded to earlier, the gas taxes are slowly diminishing because people are buying more efficient cars. And right now, people who are buying gas in our state are really us, the Connecticut residents. They're not people from out of state generally.
Yeah.
But
basically, at the end of the day, we can't go borrowing the way we've been, and we need to change our how we handle our finances. So these are the options going forward. We can do nothing, which we've been doing for 30 years. How's that working for everybody? I don't think it's all that great. We can raise the gas tax. It's currently 25 cents a gallon.
And just as an aside, in order to do the infrastructure projects that we would need to do, we would have to raise the gas taxes approximately 50 cents a gallon. So that would mean that our total price of gas would just go further through the roof. And because people are buying more efficient cars, it's just, we're gonna have to keep increasing it.
We're drawing out we're slowing the rate at which the Special Transportation Fund is likely to become insolvent, but it does matter. I mean, certainly the kind of gas tax that we'd be talking about would matter, but I think that it doesn't really address either the structural change issues in the Special Transportation Fund, or get past really, that would just be for like subsistence level, that we have 242 bridges that need to be brought up to a state of good repair. We have our road networks that need to be improved. We have other infrastructure needs. But what we're not able to do is look prospectively forward and say, what do we need to do to be competitive with other states? What are other states doing that that we could be doing, that we can use to draw businesses here, make families want to move here, keep people in Connecticut. So it's very entwined with how we live as a state. So, okay. We'll give you a minute to read it. No, I'm kidding. Essentially, what it comes down to is if we do nothing and the Special Transportation Fund continues to lose revenue like it is, and given the fact that Wall Street is not going to be interested in issuing debt to an entity that has a Special Transportation Fund that's likely to go insolvent, they're just, even if you use special tax obligation bonds, I think it becomes more, the lift becomes much heavier and less likely. And I'll also add in the fact that it's not going to help our credit rating much at all. The point is that we would have to start moving more funds from the general fund. Again, these are programs and other areas of spending that are important to all of us here.
Like schools.
Like schools. Fond of saying that people, what they don't want is to take crumbling infrastructure to crumbling schools, which is likely if we get into a situation where we have to keep pulling money away from school construction and other projects to maintain the roads because we didn't do anything now. And
this is the thing that got me. 1 cent is only $15 million in revenue for our state. So that was the thing that kind of woke me up thinking we need to look at that. And this is what I was referring to earlier. In order to get the revenue that we need to fund the projects that need to happen, but also make sure that we are able to keep track of our current repairs.
But this number,
It's a big
I mean,
number.
and just so you know, this is what we do in a year, okay, or in one budget cycle. This is one. So it's, again, purchasing power of 54 cents is not a long-term strategy that can really help us. Next.
Oops, can you go back? So one thing just to say, just Governor Lamont, and I'm going to let him talk in a few minutes, but we're as soon as we're finished here, Governor Lamont has introduced this debt diet, and it is basically holding the line on really looking at every single project that's coming on and deciding, are we going to bond for it or not? Because our debt servicing is very high in our state. And since we've gone on this debt diet, for the first time, Connecticut has been oversubscribed in its low-level bonds that we were doing, and our credit worthiness has gone up, which has actually caused a decrease in the amount that we will have to pay into service our debt. So it's been a very positive thing that's been received very well. And my concern with this proposal is that would just go away.
I just want to interject. I think that this isn't a partisan thing. I mean, to me, this is, we're talking about a necessity for a well-planned, well-maintained infrastructure drives our economy. It's the backbone of any state's economy, or frankly any country. And when by overbonding, oversubscribing, you're really not. Again, it doesn't get us to the point where we need to have a consistent, regular, consistent and long-term planning approach to infrastructure planning. But that's pretty much it. There's more to talk about in Q&A. We can also get into this too. You gotta click one more. There it is. So this is really what would be. These are the costs of when we bond too much, when we oversubscribe. We we wind up losing out on this. And I mean, I can read each one of these things, but you know, I mean, Small Business Express, that was something that I helped begin under the previous administration. You know, I mean, that alone has been responsible for a lot of revenue coming into Norwalk.
We actually have a list of some of the things we put together, of things that would be at risk if we were to go under this. And so we'll let you kind of take that away and read it.
I mean, more importantly, I mean, we're actually, we're training, we have, right now we have 30,000 job openings in the state of Connecticut. A lot of that is in manufacturing and advanced manufacturing. They need talent. They need young kids coming up out of high school that are interested in manufacturing, advanced manufacturing. So between Small Business Express and the Manufacturing Assistance Act, that pays for training, that pays for apprenticeships. We want to be competitive with other states. We have a great deep water port. We need to keep that navigable. You know, if we start basically making it tougher for the Port Authority to do their job, then that hurts us. Open space. We have a lot of environmentalists in the room. I love the environment. These are sacrifices that may have long-term implications that I just don't think people want to think about. That's it. Sorry, go ahead. Essentially, tolls themselves are, what we're dealing with is, what we have to decide is, are we going to stay where we are, or are we going to, make decisions that are going to improve our future? For a long time, I was a no on this. I just thought, I get frustrated too. It's like, it just feels like every time I turn around, the state is, they're asking for more money for me, and I'm like, what am I getting back? And at the end of the day, what helped me was when I'd always maintained, if we do a lockbox, if we do some basic level of security where whatever we raise on tolls, or would raise on tolls, goes into a dedicated fund only to help transportation, to build out our infrastructure, to make us more competitive, I could get behind that. The fact is, there's also, people talk about the lockbox referendum that passed that is the lockbox in over the transportation fund, but there's also federal lockbox in that any money raised on federal roads, on a given federal road, has to be used for that federal road until all the improvements and changes are made.
So just one thing to add is we already see the writing on the wall that our gas taxes and the revenue that we get from our gas is going down. And we have an opportunity to be strategic, to be a little bit longer term thinking, and this is a plan that is going to take time to get in on board and to implement. And as our gas taxes are going down, we're just thinking of our next revenue stream of replacing that. And eventually, I'd really like to see that this will be the main source of our revenue, and we will not be reliant, and hopefully our gas taxes will be able to come down in the future. But I think
also, sorry, just interject. There's also talk on the federal level about making serious investments in transportation infrastructure. One of the jobs, one of the tasks I was given when the Speaker of the House put me in charge of essentially transportation funding. They created a position called the Chief Financial Transportation Officer. The point of this is to really, to oversee spending, but also look for alternative, creative, financing ways to raise revenue. One of those is something called public-private partnerships. It's an interesting idea, but other states have done it, and they've done it spectacularly poorly. And that's really not a way we need to go unless we study it. Using the federal, the FAST Act, and using some of the federal programs to move away from bonds is also a good idea. There are other things that can help, but get us part of the way there, and creative finance and that kind of thing. But they're not a long-term goal unto themselves. But it will be interesting to see what the federal government has to say.
I think just kind of going back, you know, this is the current proposal that everyone's kind of talking about now. And after discounts and everything, it's going to be looking at like tolls every sort of 6 to 7 miles. And that after you know, user resident discounts as well as sort of congestion times and frequency of rush hour for commuters, that, you know, would come down to about 25 to 35 cents per gantry. And my view is I'd rather pay, you know, 25, 35 cents every 6 miles rather than pay, you know, a big $15 for further apart gantries, because I think that could actually hurt our local congestion on our local roads. So we're going to go into some questions, but this is
Yeah, I mean,
where we are.
Basically, yeah, there's, I mean, now we're going to get into the appendix, which is arguably longer than the rest of the presentation you just saw. So I think that what we probably want to do now is, would you like the governor up?
Yeah.
To say a few words, or would you want to do Q&A?
Do I need a microphone? No. Not yet, okay. Well, look, Chris, Lucy, thank you for letting me crash your party here. These guys are important to know. You know, what'd you say? How many years in finance? We need that experience up there.
25.
Yeah, and will you show this presentation to the legislature? That'd be a big help. We got a little education we got to do, and this guy, you're on transportation and appropriations.
Finance.
And finance, so good man for us to know. Harry Rilling, is Rilling doing a good job here in Norwalk? I think he's doing a good job. Let me just say a couple of things. I've only been your governor for 120 days, so can't blame me for everything yet, but we're getting this thing going. And after GE left, and I started thinking about running for governor, and since being governor, I've talked to almost every business leader in the state. And they've told me to the person, the two things we got to do to get this state growing again is, number one, get your fiscal house in order, and number two, fix the transportation system. And we're going to do both of those things. You know, when it comes to our fiscal house in order, we submitted a budget. It's now before the legislature, but we've dealt with our pension costs and our health care costs, and as you guys were just describing, doing something about the bonded indebtedness we have. And as the presentation showed, for the first time in decades, they upped our outlook. The Standard & Poor's said you've gone from neutral, that's no good, you don't want to be neutral, to positive. And that was incredibly important. And that's sending a signal to those around the country, because poor old Connecticut had a bit of a grumpy reputation out there for a while, saying this is maybe a place where we want to come. Maybe this is a place where young families want to move. This may be a place where a business wants to start up. And when it came to transportation, we heard loud and clear that we're having a hard time getting our customers, our employees. They can't get around. The gridlock on the highways, as Lucy said, the train is slowing down. And what are you going to do about that? Well, there's several options, as you saw in this presentation. You know, one, there's a lot of guys running around with signs that say no tolls. Well, what do you want? Just more gridlock, or it ain't broke, don't fix it? That's not a prognosis that either party is subscribing to right now. The one bit of good news is the Republicans have come forward with a plan as well. Both the Republicans and the Democrats in the legislature believe that we're going to need about $700 million a year more in funding if we're going to speed up Metro North, if we're going to improve the exits on I-95 to end that congestion. And that's a number that we've all agreed to. It used to be, oh, it's all just waste, fraud, and abuse, so we can do it without having to pay any more. That's no longer the case. And as Lucy was explaining, the biggest difference is the Republicans want to borrow it. And I would make the case that we've been addicted to debt in this state for a long time. That's one of the things that got us into the pickle we are right now. And you just can't put $700 million a year on the credit card and put that on the backs of the Connecticut taxpayers. It's the wrong way to go.
your children, grandchildren, and they're the ones that are gonna be paying
They're
for
gonna
the
be
bill.
paying 110% of that forever, and that's the wrong way to go. And we do have a plan that makes an awful lot of sense. These electronic gantries, by the way, are getting better looking. The cameras are getting smaller, getting neater. We've got a bill out there. It's gonna be presented before the legislature within a week, and it's very clear what we do. The 50 gantries on those 4 highways, raising over $800 million a year. As Chris said, money going to a lockbox specifically just for transportation, cannot go anywhere else. And that will mean the Mixmaster and Waterbury and the viaduct and these things that are breaking. And here in Fairfield County, speeding up rail service. We can make 5, 10, 15-minute difference between going from Norwalk to Stamford to New York City in the next 5, 7 years if we make these changes we've got to do going forward.
Can I interject, Governor?
Sure.
In the 30 years that we've been under investing in our transportation system, like the Danbury Spur and the other spur lines and the other areas, New York has increased their time into New York City by 15 minutes. So again, it's the priorities. And putting a flag in the sand to say that this is the direction we need to go.
I'll just leave you with one other thought that came up there. I mean, I understand that the middle class is getting slammed in this state. I know that people have been paying an awful lot, and you saw some of the ideas we have to make this a lot more affordable. Not just that out-of-staters are going to pay for 40% of it, and we're not going to pay it with a lot of bonding. We're going to pay our bills now and not leave it to the next generation. You saw that there's going to be a maximum discount for Connecticut people. We have a couple other things we're going to do. For those working families, say 125% of poverty, we're going to put a free 100 miles onto your Easy Pass to make that doable. For folks in our cities, we're going to reduce the price of bus service to $1. I want to make sure that people can get around. I want to make sure this is affordable, and I want to give people an incentive to get out of their cars and going forward. And we. Hey, Scott, like that. And you do that, you couple that with what we just passed last week, raising the minimum wage to $15, doing paid family and medical leave, make this a more family-friendly place. These are the type of investments we make that make Connecticut get going again. We've been flat as a pancake for a long time, young people not moving here, not creating the jobs we got to do. And I believe in my heart that the most important investment we can make is education and transportation. That's what this budget does. That's what Lucy and Chris are doing every day up in the legislature, fighting for you. Keeping an eye on Bob Duff up there, who's your majority leader. You've got some pretty good representation up there, I gotta tell you that. And I am proud to be up there fighting for you every day. So thanks for inviting me, you guys. I appreciate the chance.
We're gonna open it up for questions, a little AMA.
This first question is, the Democrats, thank goodness, control both houses of the legislature, and the governor's a Democrat. Where's the, is tolling in doubt if the Democrats are supporting it? Who among the Democrats is opposed to it?
Well, I can start with that. It's a tough vote. You're asking people to sacrifice a little today for a much better tomorrow, and you got the other team saying you can have all this and it won't cost you a dime, we can just borrow it in the future. And frankly, when you have elections every 2 years, casting a tough vote is not always easy. These two folks are standing loud and clear, right where they stand. And every day we got to get more and more people on board. And I don't think we're going to get one Republican vote, which is very discouraging.
It's, unfortunately, it's just been used as a political football. It's been used as a wedge issue. So a lot of people have a lot vested in no. Unfortunately, that's not a debate. That's just it's a position that doesn't really develop our state, our economy, and improves lives for citizens here. And so really, it's by that's why we thought it was so important. We heard a lot from the other side, but it's just. You need to understand the facts, really, to have a conversation. Yes, sir.
Hi, I'm William Woodham with the Stratford Democrat Town Committee. We helped elect Governor Lamont. Good job for you.
Hey, William, we like you.
Question I have, a point and a question. The middle class is being taxed. You're talking about putting money in a lockbox. We had tolls before. Once you start them, they never stop. If you have to put it in a lockbox, what happened to it before it was in a lockbox? Where did the money go? Second, if you're taxing, I did some research. It says our gas tax is 43.8. Another website says it's 39.3. You said it's 25
I
cents.
think
a gallon.
that's the state portion. There's
State
also
port,
a-
so it's really higher than what you illustrated, correct?
Yeah, so there's a federal amount in there.
So our gas tax are higher. So my question and point is, you're already taxing us for motor vehicle, sales tax, state income tax, gasoline tax, tax within our town, sewer tax. There are enough taxes, so if you add on a little more and you give certain middle class or senior people a break, it's still more money coming out, and it's still going to force people to leave the state, which now you're taking in less money. So can you speak to that?
I'm happy to start.
I
and
think
then
I
we
think
can
I'll want to answer that.
kind of go. I consider tolling a usage fee. We don't get on the train to New York and without buying a ticket. This is part of it. My view is I would much rather our roads be paid for by the people that are using them. And currently, we have people who are going to the Cape from New York City and not paying for their roads. You can get through the state of Connecticut without buying gas. We have trucks that are utilizing our roads and putting a lot of wear and tear, and for us to pay for them as Connecticut residents is difficult. And my feeling is, look, let's offset some of the cost to the people who are actually using the roads. So if you aren't using, the 84 or 15 or 95, then this shouldn't be an issue. But it is, making sure that we are able to upkeep our roads and not us as tax people having the full burden. And also not having our children. I have 3 children. I want them to stay in Connecticut, and I don't want them to have to pay for the roads that were done, 20 years before they were adults. So that's just my 2 cents, and I'd love to hear what the governor
Well,
has to say.
thank you for your question. But it comes down to priorities. So, for example, if we don't do anything, and the Special Transportation Fund basically, we keep it going, keep it limping along, and we invest just to keep the bridges from collapsing, which is unfortunate, just in general. That what you can't do is make improvements in other areas. So, for example, the governor brought up GE. One of the main reasons GE left, it wasn't huge taxes, it was talent. They were looking for talent. GE was changing their model. They wanted to go into software and IT services and that kind of thing. They wanted to be in Massachusetts where that talent could be found. So what we're trying to do is, we're trying to invest more in STEM. We're trying to invest more in education to develop the pipeline. I mean, my son goes to NECA. That's the it's P-Tech. That's the working with IBM and the high schools to develop more IT-minded.
I understand all that.
No, but what I'm getting
This is
to.
very
Why are we
confusing.
paying
Is it in a
for that
lockbox or not?
For the roads.
There's lockbox. Yeah.
Before there wasn't.
But
So-
but you're asking like what it was like before that. Frankly, I think Connecticut never had, and this is what I was talking about planning before. Other states have long-term plans on how they're doing their infrastructure. Connecticut had these stops and starts, sort of Band-Aid fixes to different things, but no real plan on any of this stuff. So when, yeah, thanks. So it wasn't. Connecticut really wasn't doing anything where you could see the results of the investment, because you weren't seeing bridges and tunnels being improved. I mean, I think that they were doing. Frankly, I think their approach was sort of haphazard in terms of how they prioritize projects. So it's like this needs to be a lot more organized, and I think that one of the frustrations that I have, that a lot of citizens have, is they don't see where their money is going, how it's being invested, how it's being spent. I think Connecticut residents need to basically see us using their funds as responsibly as we can going forward, so they so they understand, what our priorities are.
Look, I hear the skepticism in your question, though, and people just don't really quite trust government. If this gentleman said, how come you got Democrats and business leaders and labor, how come this is not a slam dunk? It's because people fundamentally have a distrust sometimes of what's going on. The lockbox is just one way to try and give people some confidence. Federal law dictates I can only spend that money on the transportation projects. You can't take that out. That said, look, we had this passport to parks thing the other day. That was money supposed to go to parks. Then it looked like it was getting siphoned off. The lottery, that was supposed to go to education. What happened? So I understand the skepticism people feel, but at the end of the day, this is the most important investment we can make. And yeah, people leave because of taxes, but they also leave because it takes them an hour to go 10 miles at this point. That's a job killer for the state. Hey, Ed.
Hi, Governor. Could you speak to us about what efficiencies are being put in place? Because I think that people hear that we're being taxed here, this is a gas tax, there's a liquid toll. What is it that we are proposing this year and going forward to make every dollar go longer? Like what efficiencies, how much more efficient are we becoming as a government, or are we proposing to become as a government, so that people don't see that this is just a constant bleed, but that we're actually making the best possible use of every dollar going forward?
Yeah, look, I'll start with that and then let you guys take over from here. But we're going to fundamentally transform this government. There's a position in government called Department of Administrative Services. They handle IT, they do personnel, they do contracting. It was never considered that sexy a job here at state government. I come out of the private sector. It's also called the CFO. We have not a political person in that job, that we have somebody who spent 12 years at IBM and started up an IT company. We're going to fundamentally transform how the citizen interacts with their government. Right now, there's like 70,000 different ways, in addition to just paying taxes, that you interface to your government. 99% of them are with pencil and paper, and sometimes a notary public. We're going to change that in terms of IT and doing all that online, not waiting in line at DMV, but going online. And I'll tell you something else. We have about 1/3 of our state employees are going to retire in the next 4 years. And a lot of people are saying, woe is us, what are we going to do? How are we going to be able to replace all these folks? Well, we'll see how many of these people we replace. Maybe we're going to have more people with IT skills. Maybe the not-for-profit community is going to come in. So I've got to give people some confidence that I'm not going to get it all done in one budget cycle, but I got to give you a sense of direction where we're going to go. And I think you can see a radically transformed government that gives William a little more confidence that the money is being well spent. And I'll just leave you with the thought, same thing on transportation. I can't overpromise. We're not going to do all this in 2 years. But you sure as heck going to get an idea of where we're going, what your system looks like, what I-95 looks like, what Merritt Parkway looks like, what Metro North looks like. And that's why I believe that you're going to want to keep your company here, grow your company here, good paying jobs so your kids come back. Thanks, everybody. I'm going to scoot out of here. That's been a lot of really tough questions.
So just to follow up, and because that's a huge concern of myself, and being a CFO of companies, one of the things I wanted to do when sitting on appropriations was actually sit on every agency presentation. We're assigned subcommittees, but I decided I want to attend all of them because I want to figure out, how everything works, how it all fits in. And I found out some stuff during that process and asked people questions. I was able to quiz the CFO of Yukon why they don't work with purchasing with the state, and talk to them about why they're not sharing the purchasing and making sure that their contracts are being bid on competitively. Following all these meetings that I've had over the course of the last sort of couple months, I actually met with the person who heads up DAS and said, let's figure out how we can save our state money. We spend $4.5 billion in contracts. Let's figure out to make sure everything is competitively bid. What is the process? Let's figure that out. Let's look at maybe combining bit better our purchasing abilities among UConn, our agencies, state colleges, community colleges. We have potential, I think, to do a lot of savings. Now, it's not something that's going to be done in the biennium. This is a long-term strategic plan, but that's how I think we need to think as a state. We can no longer be thinking on, and this is what I ran on, we can't be thinking on the 2-year budget cycles. We need to be thinking long-term. So that's something I'm committed to focusing in on. I'm working with DAS to see how we can do that, and what is there things that are legal impediments to making everybody purchase together. So that's a key focus, because I think we need to be focusing where we're spending our money. Oh, do you want to?
Well, yeah, we'll take his and then I'll answer your question.
Well, you finish that if you will.
Okay, sure. I mean, I think that we need to understand and make improvements in how we do regulatory policy in the state of Connecticut. You talk to business owners, small and large, every level in between. I think that they just feel it's getting tougher to do what they have to do because, frankly, the agencies aren't as efficient as they need to be. I think this has been a running issue for a long time. Right now, the average wait time at the DMV is 3 hours. The DMV likes to say that it's only 42 minutes, but they're including wait times for places that don't have any customers. So I've been advocating, either do by appointment or online. And then Governor Lamont comes in. He says it was also something he wants to do too. I'm like, this is Governor we can work with. I appreciate it. Like the mindset of making our agencies more efficient by giving them the tools they need to do so, and the training and hiring the people to oversee these functionalities is huge. It's an important focus that we need to get behind. So that's pretty much it.
I have a couple of questions. I'll try and capitalize them.
I might only have one answer.
For that gentleman's benefit, you're not old enough to remember when we had tolls in Connecticut.
I am old enough.
1986.
What is it?
1986.
So it's 40 years ago. But I wasn't unhappy when they discontinued them.
Yeah.
I'm not happy now that we're going to reinstate tolls. However, I'm in favor of them because that is much better than bonding or doing any other tax increases.
Right.
It is a user fee. I would like to see a higher toll rate for trucks, which eat up our roads badly, than for automobiles. And I haven't heard that being in the legislature, yet. But you didn't answer it, but I want to get all my points in. Secondly, for all of us, I would assume everybody lives in Fairfield County here. I have, and everybody has Easy Pass probably, New York Easy Pass, that's the one that's closest. I use that a lot. I just went over the deep Bronx-Whitestone Bridge twice yesterday. I went to Manhattan on Thursday. I'm going back to New York City next Friday, this coming Friday. And I'm going to keep my New York Easy Pass because the gigantic discounts I've written to you both.
I spoke to you on the phone.
Yes, we did. But
you
there's
were right.
nothing in the legislative process that I hear now. It's going to be done by the implementation process. And if it's not in the legislation, it isn't going to get implemented. And the worst thing that we can have is people having a New York Easy Pass and Connecticut Easy Pass, because you're going to be going like this and you're going to have a lot of accidents. So,
Well, I'll give you a sort of broad brush answer, because it's that what happens going forward has to be fair for our residents. And we're down in Fairfield County, we have a lot of commuters here. So, I mean, I think that how we do, and when we were in hearings on transportation, reciprocity with other states was mentioned a lot. I know it's still an issue that's being discussed. It's really like how that's going to work and how that's all going to come together. And based on our conversation, I did follow up and to see if this is a conversation that's still going on, and it is. It's not, it's just, I think that, like a lot of things, it's a lot of things happen below the radar. You don't see the conversations happening, you don't see the meetings happening, but if we don't have, really, for something like tolling to work, you have to have Connecticut residents signing up for Connecticut Easy Pass. It's not going to work if they do New York. So obviously, how we get to something that's fair for commuters is a big deal, because they're driving a good chunk of our Fairfield County's economy. The state economy is one thing, but also what's going on in Fairfield County. So that, I mean, we can get into more, but I'll give Lucia that chance. I'm sure you've spoken to him too.
Yes, we've spoken, and I totally, the point taken, and, you know, talking to people who are developing the bill, if this is something that we can look at now as part of the legislation, and that's something that we're still looking into. Because I do think that that would be a really convenience. I have a New York Easy Pass too, and I totally agree.
The technology is there.
The technology is there, absolutely. It works in
In New Jersey, New
Massachusetts.
York.
There you go, finally, somebody
Yeah.
said it, works in Massachusetts. It's
Yeah.
fantastic. It's no big deal.
Yeah, so, you know, you're, I fully agree.
And this point of the coordination between the two states, I mean, New Jersey and New York must obviously already have some kind of coordination.
Well,
Easy pass people from both states.
Absolutely, and there is a lot of coordination that can happen. One, for if we have, you know, an out-of-state person who doesn't necessarily want to pay the toll, and then, you know, we can work with the other states and do a reciprocity arrangement. So it's something that we definitely needs to happen, and it's more efficient.
I just had no discussion about federal funding for this. Have you done any studies, and have you been in touch with our state congressional delegation, federal partnership?
Zero.
So Roman just asked the question about federal funding of installation of tolling, and do you want to
Yeah.
field that
I
question?
mean,
No,
the,
excuse me, not for totally, for improving our transportation.
Okay, yeah, they're actually, the federal government does pay for a huge percentage of our
Yeah.
infrastructure, like.
several years ago, I mean, I had a conversation with Commissioner Rediker of the DOT, and I was saying, then we have to get off bonds, we have to get off debt. And that, you know, looking at, you know, the FAST Act, looking at RIF and TIFIA, which are you know, loan programs for road, rail, and other infrastructure needs, that money is there to be used. And why are we issuing more debt when we can, you know, work with the federal government to, you know, take some of the load up? So I think that where, you know, it's been useful for us to use federal money is I think, you know, we've been doing that, but again, it's one piece of a much larger puzzle to put together for you know, a fiscal plan going forward.
Well, don't we have figures on what we can expect, so how much we have to charge, and are there any charts on that? I mean, I didn't see anything in the presentation.
So basically, as we go through each project, there is the total amount of the projects are identified, and then there is a amount that the federal government does pick up. So that is in the overall DOT plan, because they have a prioritized plan. We didn't want to get too into the weeds with a lot of the detailed numbers, but
80%.
within the appropriation committee, we sat down with the DOT and we talked to them and said, well, what are the key priorities and what is the federal government paying? And one of the questions I had is, are we ever leaving money on the table? And that is one of the things that, you know, the commissioner said no.
And that's all, just so you know, that is an important change, because I think, you know, previous commissioners, they didn't have a problem with leaving money on the table, and it's something that I've been pushing for, and Lucy's been pushing for, and I think is important.
I
But
worked on the first interstate highway, Eisenhower's interstate highway program right out of college, so I know this subject very well.
Mhm.
I know that there is federal funding.
there are funds, and but there's also, you know, we have a different, you know, infrastructure week every week, and on the federal level, I think that frankly, I was encouraged that the president was speaking with the House and the Senate on a infrastructure funding plan, because frankly, you know, Connecticut's not the only one that has serious infrastructure needs. Every state, it's like, it's coming like a state hobby. Every state has serious you know, maintenance to do.
And I
But-
specifically asked Jim Hines, you know, he says he's working with whoever he can talk to, because he realizes that this is not just Connecticut priority, this is, many states have this, red and blue alike.
Another question? Okay.
For those of us who understand the need for tolls and are on board, what specific action could we take to help you get this bill passed?
Tell a friend. I mean, look, it's specifically, I think that what we're talking about is, I think that, you know, by talking about this issue in an honest, straightforward way is useful for our citizens, because then they can talk about tolls in a way that it may win some people over, it may not, but if you feel strongly about it, frankly, tell people that. But more specifically, I mean, you can have them call us, you can have them get hold of the governor's office. But right now, the reason, I mean, it doesn't feel like it's much, but what's happening right now is we're having these fights internally. We're having in the legislature, you know, we're trying to get people to support, this initiative. You know, it's. And I think that the governor coming down here, I think was important because it's important for people in Fairfield County to understand what the, you know, what the thinking is. But it is, you know, I think that, you know, we just have to keep working internally to make it happen.
So one.
Sure, absolutely.
Now that the Republican.
So my suggestion is to write an op-ed, send it to the Current, send it to the Hour, send it to every newspaper within Connecticut, and lay out a methodical reasoning, what your support is. I mean, we can do that, it's only going to go so far, but I think coming from a resident in our state, it's going to come with a lot more shout.
Well,
and if we're not your rep, please write your reps as well.
But let me just ask you a question. You said you're supportive. Why are you supportive?
Why am I supportive? Because I don't believe in increasing our debt, and I think it's time. I think it'll help our infrastructure. By increasing and improving the infrastructure, will bring business to Connecticut. It will help increase our property
Should give her a mic
values.
and Right.
It'll help increase our property values, and also I'm afraid of how bad the roads are. It's dangerous. I'm worried about a Miami's Bridge situation, and we just can't wait.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I just want to mention that there are 13 people in this room from 2 different grassroots organizations,
Okay.
Indivisible Electioneers and Resistors.
Okay.
We're Fairfield County-based grassroots organizations. We're very active on this issue. And that if there's anybody in this room who wants to get active, we're doing letters to the editor. We're making phone calls to senators. Sometimes they're not our own senators. Sometimes we're getting people that we know will live in the district to make those calls. There are a couple of senators that have been specifically identified as needing a little push. And we are happy. We're over here. We help prepare some of these materials. We're over here. We're over there. We're all over this room.
The resistors
That's
meet
great.
every
That's
Monday
great.
morning.
And if I might just interject, I mean, thank you for all, because I know how hard you're working at this, and this does help get the word out, and it's you know, people, there are a lot of people in this situation. You were just asking, what can I do? Where do I turn? You had a question?
I just would like to see the message simplified. It's a
That works.
binary choice between debt and future debt, like you say, on the children, or doing this now, and it's a simple answer.
Yeah.
I wanted to try to give as much color to the situation, because I also think that, you know, this is an important issue. And it's something I've thought long and hard about. And this is why I wanted to really get up and explain it in a methodical way, so
Yeah.
we can.
I agree 100%. We're here because we feel this is a critical issue for the state of Connecticut, and it's, like I said before, you don't want to have to take crumbling infrastructure to get to, you know,
You
crumbling
don't
schools
have
and that
to
kind
tell
of thing.
anybody here, we're on the roads, you drive up all through New Haven and in West Norwalk, the roads are deplorable.
But that's the thing, we were already primed by
So
the
you
time you
don't
got
have
there.
to tell us about
Yeah,
that. We
yeah,
just want-
so to keep it simple, it's binary, like you said, I agree with you,
Yeah.
it's a binary issue.
But the fact of the matter is, you know, there's another side running a campaign that's not interested.
So
in-
tell them that they're fiscally irresponsible, this is the responsible.
No, you know what?
fiscally.
That's a fine approach, but what we decided to do instead is say, okay, that's their side. This is what you're not hearing, and this is you know, why it's important, why it's important for our state's future, and why it's important for our great-grandchildren's future. And we're making that case. they can make their case, but, you know, why should I waste your time telling them where I think they're wrong when I can say, explain, this is, you know, this is
That's
where.
very good of you, but the fact is, what they're proposing is bad for the state.
Oh, I agree.
That is bad for
And
the
we
state.
said that before, yeah, it's
So
actually, it would cost.
It's a good thing to say that, because it makes people focus on what is good for the state.
But we'll work on simplifying this, I agree with you.
Yeah, in terms of
And you.
simplifying it, has the AG's office weighed in on the constitutionality of having an interstate road, of giving in-state residents a discount depending on their ability to pay or not pay on an interstate road that's going to be traveled upon by people out of state who are not going to be able to avail themselves of this discount? Because if they have weighed in on this issue and they've determined that that might be a violation of either the Equal Protection Clause or the Commerce Clause, at the end of the day, the more simple argument is that at a minimum, out-of-staters will share their fair share or will pay their fair share
Right.
of the cost of maintaining these roads where they're not doing it now. So we eliminate these sort of ancillary issues that may very well come up.
Well,
which are,
I think it's a good point. I mean, we could draft a letter tomorrow and get it to.
I understand that that has actually been evaluated, and there is currently a legal dispute in Rhode Island right now with a trucks-only tolling issue. So
Yeah, with the-
it has been looked at from very legalese angles, so.
but we want to avoid these little arguments because ultimately, at the end of the day,
And the
we're-
current legislation addresses those issues, as from what I've understood in talking to various people.
Okay, good.
You alluded a little bit to this, but we drive through Rhode Island fairly often, and they put up signs near construction projects that said this bridge is being financed by X dollars.
Sure.
Scheduled completion is such and such a date, this project will be finished on time. I think one of the problems, for example, with the stimulus bill back in 2009 is that the Democrats didn't get any credit for it. It wasn't like branded. And I think that, you know, if people feel that the money is going to a project that is helping them and helping their community, they'll be more.
If I might interject, and then we'll get back to our regular scheduled viewing. When that happened, when the Obama plan came forward, the stimulus package came forward, what I thought was needed was messaging, and I approached the leadership and the House Dems and the Senate Dems to say, okay, let's use the stimulus money and tell our residents how we're using it, we're using this money, how it's going to be, used in their communities, how they're going to benefit from this, and talk about the programs that it would fund and the net benefits. And I think that we would have, I think in Connecticut it would have helped people understand more so. But I think that's not it's a lesson that's not been lost on me. I think in this what we're talking about now, people do need to understand that there are costs to inaction. There are costs to buying into a plan that the Republicans are selling that'll never work. That we're going to lose population. We're going to lose revenue, and I think that it's and our grandkids pay in the end. So I agree that we need to improve our messaging more, and but also make this happen. James?
I would say that is a huge issue, is messaging. And I think if we are able to succinctly develop a message and communicate it, and I have seen in other states where they have done it, and I think it's wonderful. I think it's very effective. So thank you for that recommendation.
And then back.
Christina Barstow, I'm here from Buchanan, part of the Buchanan DTC, and I see many other members here. We all wanted to come and support the idea of tolls. We are also hoping that eventually our spur line will be upgraded in conjunction with tolls to make it easier to get in and out of New York City. I would also urge you, when you're investigating this, to please look at international projects. I recently heard an interview on Marketplace on NPR where they said that in Europe, despite the fact that they have higher unionization rates, they have lower costs for building rail. And that could be something that you referred to, Lucy, which is the contracting costs. I don't know if there's been specific comparisons, but I just had the privilege to travel to Poland and use the high-speed rail between the capital city of Warsaw to Krakow. It took 2.5 hours. It was clean, easy, and cheap. And I don't understand why we Americans cannot get our acts together with transportation.
Well,
All over the
So,
world.
I listened to that segment because I spent a third, well, now it's a quarter of my life because I'm getting older, but a quarter of my
Right, you
life in
live in
Europe.
Europe, so you know what I'm
So
talking
I've
about.
lived in a variety of countries within
But-
Europe, and the infrastructure is better. It was, the interesting takeaway is it's not a unique issue. I mean, I thought, oh, it's probably a union thing, prevailing wage, and this is the reason that everything's so expensive. And in that segment, they talked that it wasn't necessarily it, that there was other aspects going on there.
So
But
hopefully you guys can
it's
take a look at
overall, the United States does have an issue, and this is concerning. It's really concerning that, you know, why our costs are so expensive, you know,
But maybe
to
that's
do
what
these
you're referring
projects.
to, maybe there's not enough competition in terms of the
So
bidding,
there is,
and
you
that's
know,
where
it's one of
we're-
those
I don't
things
know
that we
if
need to
that's the
look at.
answer, I'm just saying we have to look at it.
Absolutely.
To try and keep our costs down.
I had a couple comments. One is, I believe, the CDM Smith consulting firm that did the research initially to propose a framework for tolling. They have 5,000 employees. They've done projects all over the world. So there is some international knowledge behind the proposal that was put forward. It isn't the one that's being executed now because the legislature understandably has received public hearing feedback and is making changes so that it responds to the problems people have with some of the plan. The other thing that I wanted to observe is that, and I may be quite wrong about this, but Europe has been in development for 2,000, 3,000 years. The United States of America is fortunate we still have some environmentally sensitive areas left. And part of the reason I think that it does cost us a little more to do these projects is that we are trying to save parts of our country that are still somewhat natural. Europe is beautiful, but there used to be forests everywhere and there are none now, or they're isolated. So we're balancing, I think, in some of the costs that we have for transportation development. We have the desire to maintain some of our natural environment. So it's going to cost more to do that. And I know how I stand on that. It costs a little more.
You got a question?
Lisa Kazak from Stratford Democratic Town Committee. And I'm old enough to remember when 95 tolls were closed, okay, about 36 years ago. I do not remember when they began. And if there was anything like this when the tolls on 95 began. That's one comment. Another is I have driven from Florida to Maine many times, and in between many times. There is one thing that I just don't consider, tolls and gas. Whether I was someone with a little money or a lot of money, that was part of life. I have a Florida, what do you call it, Sunshine something or other?
Sunshine Pass.
Yeah, and New Jersey, I think I have, because that's where I lived when I got it. And I just don't think of tolls or gas as something to discuss. Now, of course, I think more of it because of the horrible infrastructure. I mean, just coming here from Stratford, the roads, it's nighttime, well, it wasn't night, it's raining, you cannot see the yellow line in the middle of the road. You cannot see them on the outside.
Right.
I mean, a simple thing like yellow lines would be a tremendous improvement.
Yeah,
Cat's eyes.
what's that?
Cat's eyes.
Oh, cat's eyes. Look, if we have to decide what kind of state we're gonna have, basically, I think what it comes down to. And are we gonna be a state that, you know, wants to be competitive with other states, wants to, make our infrastructure, bring our infrastructure up to speed. I mean, when I drive down to North Carolina, I see. Basically, I really don't think about the tolls much either. It's part of driving. You're driving. You get in the car, you have there's a cost associated. But I see cranes, I see construction, I see activity, I see life. And then we are one of the most educated states in the country. We have so much going for us. and, we need to do more to make sure that we are, attracting even, more people that want to be in a state that, or a state like Connecticut has so much to offer. To your point, I think we can get better at how we do our contracts, how we do our bidding, and to make us more competitive. But I think that, contractors also, they'll pit states against each other and they'll play games with how they, where they're going to do RFPs and that kind of thing. So I think that a review of how we do our design build projects going forward. I think I'd like to use lighter materials, more environmentally friendly materials, and do projects that also have external benefits to the environment and to the quality of life in communities. I heard talking. I was
Oh, no,
looking at you.
I was just trying to decide if I have to go back up to Hartford tonight.
We may actually have to go back up to Hartford.
So-
I live right on Super 7, so I always get annoyed when I want to go northbound on the Merritt, I can never get on. So is that even on the list?
That is on the list. That was actually a question that I asked Judge Doletti, and it is on the list.
No. What, the
It's
7?
the 7 interchange.
Yeah, Super 7. Yeah, that's a debate that's been going on since 1969. But I would like to see. I want it to go all the way up to Danbury. I think that.
I don't think that's going to happen.
I see that.